Well, it's a great pleasure and an honor for me to introduce Lamidi Olonade Fakeye, one of the most celebrated of Yoruba sculptors in this century and in the last.
Anyone who knows anything about African art and sculpture knows Lamidi Fakeye.
Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àjíǹde. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àtisùn dandan. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àjíǹde. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àtisùn dandan. Ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ rẹ kọ́ ní ìta kọ́kọ́, òtì rẹ kọ́ ló fà ìwọ̀n jù. Bí o bá tilẹ̀ yí wa padà, bàbá tún ọ ṣe. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àtisùn dandan. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà kí ẹ fẹ́ bàbá dópin. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà kí ẹ fẹ́ ní kejì dandan. Ìwà ìfẹ́ ni bàbá ń fẹ́ o, ìwà ìfẹ́ olùgbàlà. Bí o bá tilẹ̀ fẹ́ ní kejì, bàbá tún ọ ṣe. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àtisùn dandan. Ó yá ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àjíǹde. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àtisùn dandan. Ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ rẹ kọ́ ní ìta kọ́kọ́, òtì rẹ kọ́ ló fà ìwọ̀n jù. Bí o bá tilẹ̀ yí wa padà, bàbá tún ọ ṣe. Ẹ̀rọ̀nù ẹ̀pẹ̀ wàdà nítorí àtisùn dandan.
Lamidi Olonade Fakeye comes from 5 generations of woodcarvers. Names are important among the Yoruba, and his middle name has a very special meaning. When he was 10 years old, Lamidi sat under a tree and began carving his first wooden figure. When the women in a nearby compound found him, they began shouting, "You are acting according to your middle name, Olonade," which means, "The carver has come."
Lamidi Fakeye is a unique, traditional African artist. Although he is instantly recognizable as a Yoruba woodcarver, he has made this art relevant to international audiences. Born in colonial Nigeria, his work has evolved through independence, the collapse of the modern Nigerian state, and is now very much at home in the internet age. Although steadfastly traditional in production, his patronage expanded wildly and included governments, churches, and international collectors. He no longer taught apprentices, but instead trained university students across the world. He maintained traditional woodcarving despite all of the changes, carrying his art to faraway places and rightly earning his 2006 title of UNESCO Living World Treasure. His life story is an important testament to how a master thrived through it all.
My mother died in 1944, and years later my father died. So after that, I get confused because I'm young and I do not know what to do to survive. So I left my hometown and went to a place called Oye Ekiti.
In order to survive at Oye Ekiti, Lamidi's family skill of woodcarving was used to make wooden plates and utensils.
As World War II came on and Hitler sunk merchant shipping, the kinds of enamel plates that a lot of people might have bought or the tin spoons that they might have had were not available. And so he went on all the way to age 24, producing tremendous numbers of very simple items. This meant that his technique became very, very good, the muscle memory as he continued over and over and over again for all those years. What he didn't have was a vision of what a fine artist would have.
Lamidi was startled when he saw the work of the great Yoruba master carver Areogun of Osi and it was then that he realized he had a long way to go as a carver.
And then one day I was passing through the front of the palace. I saw some work of this man's father, means Bamidele Areogun. So I was going to the farm to cut the tree. I did not go again. I sat down there looking at these pieces. I was very sad. I said, I'm not going to make it. It's too late for me. I was in my 20s then. And then I sat down. I returned back home. I was sad. Like this, some people asked me, are you not going to the farm? I said, no. They did not know what had happened to me. I was thinking, how could my work be as good as this? But before I did that, long ago, I used to say, before my father died, I said, there's no carver like my father. But when I saw this work, I know this man is great than my father. So I began to think about it. And when I met the son, I was happy.
Through an extraordinary circumstance, Lamidi had the opportunity to study with the son of Areogun of Osi. During the Christmas season of 1948, George Bamidele Areogun was in Oye Ekiti and introduced him to Father Kevin Carroll, an Irish priest with the Society for Missions in Africa, who had set up an art workshop at a mission station in Oye Ekiti. Among his goals was to employ master Yoruba woodcarvers to fill numerous commissions for Christian and traditional subjects. After a rough start, Father Carroll employed Lamidi, who then worked with George Bamidele and adopted the Areogun style.
So when I met Reverend Father Carroll, asked me some questions, and asked me, I brought something as like sample of my work. I did it like that of Europeans, angel, with face and everything, and Father Carroll said, no, I don't think he'll be able to work here because we want to maintain Yoruba style here. And what you are doing is different. I quickly said, yes, I will change to whatever you want. So I began my work with Reverend Father Carroll. As I promised I'm going to change it, I began to copy my master in style.
He apprenticed to George Bamidele, who in turn was employed by Father Carroll. Father Carroll had the links to the National Museum. And what the National Museum did was they brought in the very best Yoruba artworks, and Lamidi and George were told, copy them. The copies went back to the original owners. The original artwork came to the National Museum. It would never be possible afterwards for an artist to not only view, but to handle and then try to reproduce. In those 5 years, from 49 to 1954, Lamidi went from being someone with fantastic technique and a very simple vision to someone that had a vision which included all of the best of Yoruba carving.
Working 6 days a week and making private commissions during his day off, Lamidi's ability soon rose to the level of master carver, and Father Carroll promoted him widely. However, the Oye Ekiti workshop was abruptly closed in 1954 after Father Carroll had a battle with his superiors.
At the beginning, if you work up to Saturday, but on Sunday, I always found the time for myself to practice, and that's helped me a lot. And sometimes we do something, we travel during the holidays to nearby town, like 7 miles to 20 miles to 30 miles, so to sell these things. And some people commission us. I can remember in a certain occasion, it's in my book, a lady came to my house where I live and where I work, said, will you please carve something for my husband? The man was a chief at Oye Ekiti, the capital of Ekiti State now. And I said, then I carved 4. I carried to that. Unfortunately, before I get there, the man died. And when somebody died in that place, they used the senior daughter as regent, for a certain time, as they will perform the funeral ceremony for the dead chief. So I greet her according to the tradition. say, Obafemi. How are you? How are you? Say, may I help you? She was a teacher. I said, a woman came to me in Oye where I was working, asked me to do some work and bring it to the safe. I said, oh, people have gathered together. They thought I brought crown. And that lady said, oh, I'm sorry. That's my dad. He died now. That's why you see me here as a regent. I was so sorry. And we were hungry. Then we joined the lorry to another town called Ise. When we get to Ise, we go to Emuri, went to the palace. When we got there, people say, don't you want that? We have no money. We just buy a car for the king. No money to buy. Please, let me show you what I brought. It's no crown. So when I brought, because then I used to use my paint to paint my work and do it so beautiful. I know how to do that. So like a female kneel down with bow like that, from white wood, I painted. And then when I opened it, I said, no, we will buy this. Later, if Father Carol go anywhere to give lecture, he always mention that I have the best carvers in the Yoruba land. Said, George Bamidele Areogun and Lamidi Fakeye, they are the best, I have them. So we were in this condition until the time that one of the superior father came from Rome, also Father Watch. He began to give trouble between themselves. They just decide. Within such time, they closed the workshop. And then Father Caro took me and my master. Father Caro went to Lagos Holy Cross. He brought me there. The other father, Reverend Father O'Mahony, took my master to Owo.
During this period, Lamidi moved around Yoruba land in Nigeria to different mission schools as a teacher and woodcarver with Father Carroll and his colleague Father O'Mahony. He received many commissions and gained national fame for works he carved for Nigerian independence celebrations.
When I get to Ondo, I began to carve. It was during the Nigerian independence. So they gave a lot of work to Father Carol to do. Then he gave them to me, and he supervised me. Then I did the shares for the president of the House of Assembly, and then the House of Chiefs. I carved this here for the chairman. Before independence, I wanted to leave the Catholic mission. And then the father used to tell me, if you leave here, nobody will recognize your work. So trying to discourage me. I agree. But within 2 years, I made up my mind. I said, I do it. If it's not good, then I will beg, then I'll come back to the mission. And I did it. I told them I want to have an exhibition. They were discouraging me not to have an exhibition. So I disobeyed them. I have the exhibition. The first exhibition took place on the 3rd March, 1960, before our independence.
By the end of the 1950s, Lamidi was eager to break from the Catholic missions. Despite resistance from Father O'Mahony, Father Carroll supported Lamidi as he prepared for his pivotal exhibition at the British Council in Ibadan in 1960.
A lot of people came. The governor came. The last British governor in our western region came to that place. So I feel this is great. So that's how I began to know to the people. During the independence, they give me OFR, Order of Federal Republic of Nigeria. I don't think you do that here in America.
No, it's out
like,
of British tradition, but
yes,
it's a very important honor.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it, and they give me 2 medals.
Lamidi's relationship with Father Carroll was complex. Without him, Lamidi would never have had an opportunity to study with George Bamidele Areogun or to gain commissions that would lead to national and international fame. As a devout Muslim, he also respected the perceived spiritual power of Father Carroll. And even though racial tensions were present, Father Carroll acknowledged the treasure that he had in Lamidi.
There was an occasion at the beginning of my stay with him. There was a man who was struck by thunder and died. You know, when that happened in Nigeria, in Yoruba, the Shango worshippers, you know what they do? They wanted to do it. Father Carroll said, please don't do it because this man get communion, or what do you call what you eat on Sunday. He said, please, this man get it. And I don't want any pagans to perform anything on him. They said, no, we are going to do it. He begged them. They said, no. Said, all right, I'm going home now to prepare and come back in the name of my Father in the heaven. This man will wake up and he's going to tell us where he is going to be buried, either you or church, and went home. When Father Carroll came back, his hair was like this, with white and red, and he had a book in the hand. He said, I come now. What do you want? In the name of my Father. He will get up now and tell us where to bury him before he died back. These people ran away. And then when they ran away, he asked, I still remember one of my close friends, Michael Fayose, John Falokbe, and those are the people who carried the coffin. And then they turned out to so they were afraid, these people, but Father Carroll did not. And when they finished, Father Carroll said in Yoruba, he said, Shango cannot even have one hair on my head. So they buried, and that makes me know that the Catholic, the Reverend Father had the power if they want to use it, but they cannot use it until it is the last thing they can do to get what they want. So if you see him, you will be sorry that this kind of man should turn to be a Reverend Father, very handsome, and he likes me, but it's something in his blood and the other Reverend Fathers. They claim superiority being British, that British brought us up in Nigeria. So they use that for, sometimes we fight when he talks. And I said, the Father is not good. You say you are a man of God. What you are saying is not good. Later, when I began to do good things, he likes me and then talk to me. And when I became known to the public, he said, oh, Lamidi, the day we met, he said, we thank God. Who knows that everything will be like this today? I said, that's what I always remember that. And then God bless you. We have wonderful time with Father Carroll. I cannot forget him and George Bamidele Areogun. The third people are my tools. You know, I remember them daily. And as I remember my tools I use for my work. So I'm glad that I am what I am today. Without Reverend Father Carroll and Bamidele Areogun, I might not be what I am today.
Through the notoriety gained from various exhibitions, Lamidi was offered a scholarship to study in France and to spend some months in England. These were only the first of his many international forays.
When I gained French government scholarship, which took me to France, there I met in the studio. I have photographs of my work the first time I was in the studio. And then when I got there, I wanted to show the photographs of my work. But when I met many girls carving stone, I could not show my wooden work photographs. So I was ashamed of myself. When I can see a woman walking like this, what shall I do again? And then the day I went to the studio, I was wrong to choose very hard stone, which they call dur in French. Very hard stone. And the people who, they try from soft to stone, harder and harder and harder until they get. But I want to start with it, forgetting that stone is no wood. So I went to the studio with I bought some punch chisels with hammer. And I went to that wood, I throw my hammer onto it. It comes to my head, BAM! I said, oh. I tried second and third time. I was feeling headache, I just left that place in style. Nobody knows what happened to me. I kept away from, and then the student just thought that I was a raw student. Not until the day that our professor, Professor Colamarini, asked me to demonstrate for this. We have about 40 students from all over the world, American, British, Indians, and then when I gave a demonstration with my art, so they called me Professor Soul Dubois. It's on wood. So that's what I did. And when I was in France, I have gone through a worse experience because I could not speak French immediately I got there. And what I like most in the French is the bread. It's excellent. I have no money. I was poor. I can eat bread in the morning, in the afternoon, and then in the evening for quite a while until I get into one foundation in England. I think the foundation belongs to America, Hammer Foundation. I was in France for 2 academic years at École des Beaux-Arts. And then they allow me to carve wood sometimes. So the students stop looking at me when I'm, and then I left there for Britain, British Council Scholarship, bursary scholarship. I spent roughly about 6 months in Britain. But I was eager to be in America since I know I was going to go. And then the people who organized that for me met me during the independence.
Lamidi embraced a new audience that appeared in Ibadan in the early 1960s. Americans especially came in large numbers through the Peace Corps and aid projects, and to establish schools and a polytechnic. It was through Americans visiting Ibadan from the University of Western Michigan in Kalamazoo that Lamidi established his nearly 5-decade-long relationship to the United States, with many visits and extended stays. He always considered Western Michigan his home base.
It happened that Western Michigan University got the first of 4 contracts from AID to help develop a polytechnic in Ibadan. The first thing that these people did in the team number 1 was to go to Lagos for independence celebrations, and they saw Lamidi's doorposts. They had been commissioned by the chair of the art department at Western Michigan University, Lydia Seitschlag, to purchase authentic African art. Ms. Seitschlag spoke with Dr. Beeler, who was chief of party, and with Isabel Beeler, his wife. Isabel Beeler really took over the job. Isabel was given an introduction. Lamidi came to see her. They became friends right away, as was often the case with Lamidi. She said, I understand, I've seen your 12-foot veranda posts, I've seen your doors. We Americans can't afford that. We can't afford to buy the piece, we can't afford to ship it home. You need to be thinking about another way of producing pieces that can actually sell to people like us. And so she took the example of a door and said, you've carved pieces, complete pieces that are in a door. Just carve that same piece independently and sell it. So Lamidi went back to Ondo and he consulted with Father Carroll, and Father Carroll listened to the story and was very unhappy and told him, you know, a real, true, traditional Yoruba artist will do larger pieces, more serious pieces. What the Americans want is to turn you into something which is less than you are. Don't carve those are just parlor pieces. Lamidi came back to Ibadan from Ondo, saw Mrs. Beeler, explained what Father Carroll had said, and Mrs. Beeler looked at him and said, "I am Isabel Beeler. I am not Father Carroll. I want small pieces." And so Lamidi thought, and he carved the piece. AID people began to buy, Peace Corps people began to buy, USIS employees began to buy. He suddenly found that the Americans had a set of tastes that were different from the British and from the colonial officers, and he found within 1 year that he could become an independent artist.
During one of his visits to Western Michigan, he saw Derek Davenport, a chemistry professor from Purdue University in Indiana, who from then on became one of Lamidi's great friends and most important lifelong patrons.
I remember once, I think it's in the exhibit, there's a little child's doll, and it was illustrated in a book, and I showed it to Lamidi. I said, "How about carving me one of these?" And he looked at me and he says, "Derek, that's done by apprentices, not by masters." And I said, "Well, there are no apprentices around here. There's only a master. Will you carve me one?" So he picked up a piece of wood and knocked the head off what he was doing and started carving. You know, we were on those sort of terms. Another time I spread a sheet on the floor and he sat in the chair finishing one of his. We just chatted about Nigerian politics while he was finishing one of his carvings. Very easy man to get along with.
One of the significant results of this relationship was when Davenport introduced Lamidi to Harrison Idlejorg, the great African art collector. The carving that Idlejorg purchased and donated to the Indianapolis Museum of Art became the only work by Lamidi displayed by a major art museum in the United States during his lifetime.
Derek Davenport is my good friend. Was the one to talk about the possibility to come to the museum, and he brought me here. And we met. I did not know the name of that wonderful man who donated all the pieces to the museum.
Harrison Idlejorg.
Yes, I met him. He was so sick then because he was on a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And we talked together and saw me where I was demonstrating. We have one-day exhibition there. And then it was then that man or that, this my horse rider, warrior on the horseback.
In 1978, Lamidi began a career as a professor at Obafemi Awolowo University in Ife. It was there that he carved what he considered one of his greatest achievements, the monumental statue of Oduduwa.
He was then appointed into the Department of Fine Arts as an instructor, teaching the introductory course to students of fine arts, but also students in our department of African languages and literatures, introducing them to the principle of his own practice and by extension for the artists, because they could always go and verify after working with him, the tradition. And to sort introductory courses, and also for students who are doing fine art as majors, he also taught a senior seminar, so he was able to advance from instructor to senior creative art fellow, we call them art fellow, up to the level of associate professor before he retired. He was part of the intellectual ferment of the university at that time, because his standard of excellence is very high. Throughout, the university made it, supported his productivity, and that's why the university commissioned his study of Oduduwa. Not only, largely because the process of doing that was also instructive, it's also a way of teaching students. He was satisfied that the highest institution of learning recognized the value of the skills, principles, and the mode of execution is poetic process. He was happy that, was glad that that was, recognized, but not for himself, but for the purpose of Yoruba tradition, which, to which he was here. And that, for him was constantly a source of pride. He made a huge difference. He put a stamp of his personality and his expertise, his intellectual expertise on that institution. I mean, that's why the institution honored him. Among these, and it's honored, his department honored him, his faculty honored him, the university also honored him because of the difference he made in there.
While he was working at the university and after he retired, Lamidi traveled around the world doing workshops and demonstrations, having exhibitions, and teaching as a visiting professor. In 1999, he was the first featured artist for the redesign of the Africa Hall at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History. Perhaps most significantly, he embarked on the project of writing his autobiography with the help of Professor Bruce Haight of Western Michigan. This autobiography makes him unique among traditional woodcarvers in Africa, giving voice to an artist who would have been in almost all other circumstances anonymous.
He mentions that he was met Alex Haley in Colorado, that he was on a panel. Alex Haley was there and he had his manuscript. Now, Roots didn't come out until later. And so then someone asked Alex Haley, well, how are you writing this biography? He said, anyone can write a biography, or anyone can write an autobiography, anyone can write, you don't have to go to college to write. And so Lamidi said that inspired him to write his own biography, his own autobiography.
Through his story, Lamidi rose from the obscurity preferred by African art collectors in Europe and the United States, not only signing his works, but publishing his own story. It's a story about a man who was one of the greatest traditional Yoruba woodcarvers of 20th and 21st century Africa. Lamidi embraced changes and adapted. For example, using a lumber yard instead of apprentices to obtain traditional wood, but always maintaining essential qualities of traditional Yoruba woodcarving. He vastly expanded his audiences across the globe, and in the 21st century, Nigeria's foremost collector, Prince Yemisi Ceylon, was his major patron. In a prolific career, he was a bridge, defining how a master of traditional carving became modern.
I'm a bridge between tradition and then the modern art. I am the bridge. My father used to cut tree down for 2-3 years before he used it, but I have no patience. Since I have known to the world, I go to sawmill, which we call lumber yard here. There you see a lot of logs of trees which they brought to the sawmill, which has been lying down in the forest for probably 20 or over 20 years. It's well seasoned. So even about buying the lodge, I ask the sawmill to cut it into the pieces I like and keep them somewhere. That will last me.
I know Lamidi talks about his work as being a bridge between the past, the present, and the future. And I think that's an accurate description of him, his life and his work, because he bridges religious worlds as well as artistic worlds. Here is a man who is a devout and practicing Muslim, yet he also is a Yoruba man, and he's interested in continuing the dynamic history of sculpture, of wood sculpture among his people, and connecting to that wonderful past and bringing it into the present and to wider audiences. So his work is very much in the traditional style in many ways. He has this interest in a wonderful kind of balancing of smooth, rounded, very cleanly crisp surfaces and then deep textured surfaces. His work is balanced in terms of its composition, which have become much more asymmetrical because he's interested in bringing movement into his figures, and that's a change. You see, that's a change from the classical static, frontal, formal presentation of human figures and animal figures, and he's started to make them twist and turn and move, and that's an interest that he has, and it evokes something of the performance traditions among Yoruba, the importance of dance and movement. So he bridges that gap as well.
One of the things that people don't remember about Yoruba art traditions, or Yoruba traditions in general, is the word for tradition in Yoruba, Asha.
Asha.
Asha. And as Lamidi explains in his own writing, he says, Asha is to select, to choose. You choose and pick what you take from the past to bring to the present, that you take from the future.
Yes.
You see, and that's what you're doing.
That's what I'm doing.
You see one Lamidi Fakeye, you're going to know it. And I think that's also a very important part of recognizing a master. The master is not all over the place. You know, he changes, there's innovation, there's development, but at the same time, there's a certain kind of constancy.
An important question in Lamidi's career was, how do you remain a traditional artist? Because he was convinced that that is what he was and what he wanted to be. And yet you show your own uniqueness within the canon.
He embodies something that is very ancient and fundamental in Yoruba thinking, and that is that life is a journey. Aye loja orunile. Life is an ajo. Aye lajo. Life is a journey, and when we leave this world, it's like going back home. So movement of Yoruba people through time and space is I think, something that he's expressing in his work. And our friend and colleague Lamidi talks about Yoruba artists as are, as itinerant people who are strangers everywhere and never quite at home anywhere. And that artists are expected to be engaged in constant departures of creativity. Well, Lamidi embodies that. He's somebody who continues to think and to rethink his own creativity, his own imagination, and bring us something new.
You know, wood carving is something, until I die, I cannot leave it.